Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we have a really fascinating mandate.
It's an unusual one.
It really is. It sort of requires us to push back against everything, the whole modern world, which is so kinetic, so rushed.
Right.
Because our sources for this deep dive, they focus entirely on what happens when we just stop.
Stop rushing. Stop trying to intervene.
And maybe most importantly, just suspend that constant demand for a solution.
That's absolutely right. And for you listening, this means we're kind of flipping the standard expectations on their head.
Totally.
This is explicitly not about productivity.
No action plan at the end of this one.
Definitely not. It's not about finding a faster fix or generating a to-do list. The mission, based on the material we have, is purely observational.
Just looking.
Just looking. We're here to explore what you could almost call the physics of clarity.
The physics of clarity. I like that.
Yeah. What actually becomes visible when you take that element of urgency completely out of the equation.
Exactly. We are diving deep into the actual mechanics of quiet understanding. And it's a strange approach because it centers purely on the act of noticing. Mm-hmm. We're analyzing the conditions that let insight arrive instead of focusing on that impulse to immediately, fix something.
Or to intervene in any way.
Right. It's all about the necessary distance, the required silence, and this really profound idea that understanding often just shows up effortlessly.
If the conditions are right.
If the viewing conditions are right. Okay, let's unpack this unusual space.
Well, what's so fascinating is how the sources frame this. Clarity isn't presented as some kind of outcome you earn through, brute force.
Through grinding it out.
Exactly. It's not earned. It's a condition, a fundamental shift in the environment that just arises.
When the observer steps into the right parameters.
Yes. We're analyzing how things like spatial distance, timing, and even illumination fundamentally change the signal-to-noise ratio in any given situation.
And how that transforms everything, how we understand a moment or even a really complex system.
Right.
And I really want to emphasize that one crucial element again, because it's the absolute constraint that sets the tone for this whole deep dive.
The no action rule.
The no action rule. We're only discussing clarity that does not demand to be immediately translated into a strategy.
Or a response or a project management timeline.
None of it. It's just pure knowledge. It's just there, existing for the sake of its own revealed architecture.
So the mood of this whole thing should feel bright, spacious.
Calm, yeah, reflecting the material itself.
Which creates a unique intellectual challenge for us.
How so?
Well, we have to sustain a really detailed analysis of perception without ever crossing that line into advice.
Or motivation?
None of it. We're just reporters here. Reporting on the observable phenomena of insight as it surfaces in conditions of, non-effort.
Okay, so let's start with the fundamental mechanics of observation itself, specifically this idea of distance.
Physical and metaphorical.
Right. We hear that phrase all the time, you need to step back. But what is that spatial separation or temporal separation? Mm-hmm. What is it actually doing to our cognitive process? It's more than just taking a break, isn't it?
Oh, it's so much more. It's really the difference between being immersed in something and being contextualized by it.
Okay, what do you mean by that? Immersed versus contextualized.
Well, when we're in close proximity to something, whether that's, physically standing next to a crisis.
Or just emotionally tangled up in a problem.
Exactly. That proximity, it triggers what we could almost call a proximity paradox.
The proximity paradox.
Yeah. The closer and more immediate the subject is, the more likely it is that the emotional intensity of it will just completely override our rational processing centers.
I find this fascinating. The idea that nearness, that proximity itself, acts as a kind of filter that actually distorts what we're seeing.
It does.
If my nose is pressed right up against a painting, like the old saying, I'm just seeing the brushstrokes, right? The texture, maybe a tiny crack in the canvas.
But you have zero frame of reference.
None. No idea what the overall composition is.
Precisely. You are completely trapped in the sensory, immediate detail. And critically, what's happening neurologically is your limbic system is way more engaged.
The emotional brain.
The emotional brain. The intensity is anchored in that immediate detail, and it triggers a sense of threat or urgency.
Even if the threat isn't real, it might just be a threat to your ego or your sense of control.
Exactly. But as you increase that spatial distance, as you step back from the painting,
the emotional volume goes down.
It dampens, just slightly, but it's enough to allow the contours and the context of the whole situation to finally emerge.
And the individual brushstrokes, they suddenly start relating to each other.
In complex, meaningful ways you could never have seen up close.
So the emotional heat, it's like a severe distortion field. And stepping back, creating that space, is just a way of lowering the temperature.
So the boundaries become clear.
The boundaries, that's a great word for it. Suddenly you can actually see what's part of the system and what's just irrelevant background noise that felt so overwhelming when you were standing inside of it.
And this definition of boundaries is one of those specific types of insight that you can only get from a distance.
It's impossible up close.
Impossible. Proximity encourages the mind to focus almost obsessively on the elements right in front of it.
Right, and you start mistaking acute symptoms.
The sudden flash of pain.
Some of the core systemic issue.
Yes. But distance, that allows us to calibrate the true scale of things. You step back and you realize, oh, that problem I was completely drowning in.
It was just one component.
A highly visible component, maybe, but just one piece of a much larger, often slow-moving and interconnected system.
It's really the shift from like micromanagement to systems thinking.
And it's enabled simply by a change in your viewing position.
You're not smarter, you're not trying harder, you're just standing somewhere else.
And from there, you can finally see the relationship between all the elements, which was completely opaque when you were tangled up inside them.
It's like seeing a single tree versus seeing the entire forest ecosystem.
Right. The scale shift transforms the interpretation entirely.
Because now you can see the network effects, the flow of resources, the dependency structures, all the invisible stuff.
And what's so crucial to remember here is that this insight doesn't require a change in the subject. The forest didn't change.
Right.
It just required a shift in the viewer's location relative to that subject.
The spatial separation lets all these previously hidden relationships, the feedback loops, the connections, it lets them resolve into a discernible, coherent pattern.
The information was there the whole time.
The whole time. But the perspective had to change to make the data intelligible.
Mm-hmm.
That sets us up perfectly to talk about the other kind of distance, not just space, but time.
Temporal distance.
Right. And it's not just about, waiting a week. It's about allowing that internal cognitive processing speed to slow down.
Or to just pause entirely.
Yeah.
We can observe this phenomenon. It's often called the incubation effect in cognitive study.
The incubation effect.
Yeah, we can look at it purely as a mechanism for understanding. See, the human mind is incredibly adaptive. But when you force it to process really complex, ambiguous information too quickly.
Especially information that has some emotional weight to it.
Exactly. When that happens, it leans really heavily on cognitive shortcuts.
Things like confirmation bias.
Right. Or premature categorization, or just relying on old, maybe outdated mental models.
So perception gets rushed.
It gets rushed, and it creates this state of a very high load on your executive function. The sources we looked at metaphorically call it mental turbulence.
And I imagine turbulence in this case means all the data points are just mixed up. You can't tell the signal from the noise because everything is vibrating too fast.
It's all vibrating too fast, and your attention is just bouncing between all these different demands.
A constant state of reaction.
Yes. So when we allow time to pass, and more importantly, when we allow the mind to actually rest and then come back to the material without that immediate pressure.
The turbulence settles.
The turbulence settles. The brain's background processing, which is, it's always running.
Like a background app on your phone.
Exactly like that. It gets to work without the conscious mind jumping in and interfering or demanding instant results.
This sounds a lot like something called cognitive decoupling.
Tell me more.
It's this idea that you're separating the immediate sensory experience from the later reflective analysis. So if I was completely confused by some complex contract yesterday, and I come back to it today, I haven't read a single new clause, haven't had a new conversation about it, nothing has changed.
Right.
And yet the interpretation can be profoundly different.
Just because your internal state has shifted.
Right. The internal processing speed has normalized, and crucially, the pressure to do something about it has been removed.
The time delay creates psychological distance. It really does. It separates that initial pressurized encounter, which is often characterized by, fast emotional type 1 thinking.
Gut reaction.
Okay. And it separates that from the current reflective type 2 state of viewing.
So the confusion wasn't in the contract itself.
Not necessarily.
Hmm.
The confusion often came from the demand for immediate sense-making that was imposed by the deadline, or maybe the person who handed you the contract.
And once that immediate high-pressure demand is gone,
The organization process can just unfold naturally in the background. The mind isn't sprinting toward an answer anymore. It's simply observing the landscape it previously rushed right past.
I think this brings us directly to a really key distinction here.
Mhm.
This whole idea of the space of non-urgency. This feels like urgency isn't just an accelerator.
No,
It's an active inhibitor of deep understanding.
it is. Urgency functions like a very powerful but extremely narrow beam of light, a laser pointer.
Okay.
It's designed to achieve tactical efficiency, but it does that by narrowing your field of view dramatically. It only focuses on the immediate cause and effect, the next critical step.
And that focused, pressurized state, I mean, it's incredibly effective if you're, running from a tiger.
For immediate danger response, it's perfect.
Yeah.
But for seeing a long-term complex trajectory, it's disastrous.
Because if you're focused solely on that one critical next step, your brain is literally filtering out all the peripheral context.
You can't see the long-term path. You can't see the subtle things that happened 3 weeks ago that are contributing to this moment.
It's a tunnel vision enforced by the clock, a kind of cognitive scarcity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And clarity, conversely, is profoundly tied to removing that temporal pressure. Understanding is enhanced when you view it from a space where the situation is no longer considered critical.
When it no longer demands immediate action.
Right. The whole informational system is allowed to just achieve equilibrium.
The mind lets go of that intense load it was carrying.
The executive function load, yeah.
Yeah.
And all that newly freed up capacity goes toward synthesizing the contextual information it was ignoring before.
This whole reflection on the nonlinear process, it's so surprising to me. And I think it really speaks to a deep cultural bias we have.
What's that?
We equate effort, struggle, and speed with effectiveness.
Oh, absolutely.
Go on.
The harder you work, the better the result.
We assume if we just push harder and faster, we'll get to understanding sooner. But all the evidence we're looking at here suggests that slowing down, stopping the conscious effort, removing the pressure,
Is often a far more effective route to a comprehensive understanding.
it's the counterintuitive physics of insight.
It is. When you consciously push and strive for an answer, you generate internal resistance. You generate distortion as the mind tries to force all this complexity into a simple, pre-existing template.
But when you just create that spatial and temporal distance,
And you wait for the light to change.
the underlying true structure just reveals itself effortlessly.
The goal isn't to solve the puzzle faster. The goal is to step away until the puzzle pieces just align themselves in the quiet.
And this isn't some romantic idea, is it? It's a structural necessity.
It is. The complexity requires that space and time to arrange itself into an intelligible pattern.
And if we rush it,
We destroy the very conditions that are required for that pattern recognition to even occur.
Okay, so let's move now from those external variables, the distance, the time, to the internal state that's required for insight. The sources point to these specific conditions where understanding arrives indirectly. And I want to emphasize that definition again, without planning, fixing, or pushing forward.
This phenomenon, it highlights a really fundamental difference between what you could call analytical effort and receptive observation.
Okay, break that down. Analytical effort versus receptive observation.
Analytical effort is it's linear. It's deliberate. It's high energy. It's the conscious mind trying to force its way through a dense problem using sequential logic.
Hypothesis and testing.
Right. It's that part of the brain that says, okay, break this down into 3 steps and we're going to tackle point A first.
The project manager in our heads.
Exactly. Receptive observation, though, is about allowing the solution to surface from a deeper, more holistic subconscious process.
It's a state of sustained, non-judgmental awareness.
Yes, it's an acknowledgement that the complexity of the data often exceeds the immediate processing power of the conscious sequential mind.
So, if I'm trying to think of an analogy here, analytical effort is like building a car from scratch, piece by piece, following the instructions.
Right.
Whereas receptive observation is stepping back for a moment and finding that the completed blueprint just appeared on the table.
Yes, that's it.
And it didn't get there through conscious construction. It got there through some kind of quiet synthesis.
That analogy really captures the feeling of it perfectly.
Yeah.
Because the key characteristic of this indirect understanding is that it rarely feels like the end product of a conscious, linear mental assembly line.
It's not a logical conclusion.
No. Instead, it feels like a gift. An abrupt, non-logical resolution. All the elements that were separate and confusing just a minute ago.
Suddenly they fuse together.
Into a single, intelligible structure.
Yeah.
And it often happens while your conscious mind is busy with something completely mundane.
Right. The insight never happens when you're hunched over the problem, squinting at the details, fueled by coffee and desperation.
Never.
It happens when you're in the shower, or walking the dog, or just staring out a window.
Moments where the cognitive effort needed for your immediate environment is very low.
And that transition from active trying to passive reception, that's the mechanism of emergence.
What's happening in those moments from a neurological perspective is a relaxation of the default mode network's grip on your executive control.
So the conscious filter is lowered.
The filter is lowered.
Yeah.
And this allows all that background processing, the complex pattern matching, and combinatorial analysis that the brain is doing constantly.
It allows it to finish its work.
And surface the result without the critical interference of our immediate judgment or that constant demand for utility.
The brain solves the problem in the quiet, then presents the answer to the conscious mind fully formed.
Mm-hmm.
Let's bring in the metaphor of light here, because it's so beautiful and persistent in the sources. This idea of light and illumination, making things clear.
It's a powerful concept.
It is, because it intrinsically emphasizes visibility over creation.
Absolutely. We constantly confuse clarity with invention. We think we have to invent the solution.
When really, clarity is often just about visibility.
The light, whether it's literal light showing you physical details or metaphorical illumination showing you a structural truth, it just reveals the existing architecture of a situation.
It doesn't create the architecture.
It just makes the pre-existing relationships perceptible.
I mean, think about walking through an unfamiliar city at 2 in the morning.
Okay.
Every alley feels like a threat. Every shadow is confusing. The whole layout is just incomprehensible. You wait until 6 a.m., the sun comes up, and suddenly the structure of the city it's undeniable.
The streets are all in the same place.
The buildings haven't moved an inch, but the structure, the relationship between the parts, is now fully visible.
And that analogy holds up so well because it demonstrates that the effort required for clarity is often external to the struggle itself.
The act of waiting for the sun is passive.
It's completely passive, yet the change in your understanding is total.
We see this psychologically all the time.
We do. A morally or emotionally ambiguous situation, when you're looking at it in the low, high-stress light of midnight, it often resolves itself completely when you review it in the rational, well-lit conditions of the morning.
The ambiguity just disappears.
It evaporates, not because the facts of the event changed, but because the viewing conditions shifted.
It's fascinating that the truth of the situation, its structure, its boundaries, all its components, was there the whole time, just waiting for the necessary light to fall on it.
Clarity is just that moment. The light hits the structure in just the right way, and it eliminates all the shadows that were masking the true shape of things.
Which I think leads us naturally to the necessity of quiet observation in space. This quiet isn't just the absence of sound, is it? It's the absence of internal noise.
It is. This highly receptive state is the complete antithesis of filtering or judging or planning.
It's just allowing.
It's allowing the environment and the material to register fully without that immediate mental categorization, without trying to slot it into some pre-existing framework you already have.
It sounds like turning the internal volume knob down to 0, especially the volume of self-criticism and future planning.
That's a great way to put it.
So you can actually hear the faint signals coming from the material itself or from the deeper, quieter parts of your own mind.
It is exactly that, an overly dense or loud environment. And that could be physical noise or just the mental chatter about your own performance. It prevents you from having the necessary bandwidth required for holistic pattern recognition.
So if my mental bandwidth is full of, I don't know, internal monologues about deadlines or old grievances or what I need to do next,
then there's no conceptual space left for the subtle pattern to surface. The cognitive load is just too high.
And the quiet space, that's where the synthesis happens, especially for complex patterns.
Right.
Because clarity, as we've been saying, it often involves connecting 2 or 3 previously separate domains of knowledge. And if your mind is busy urgently processing 100 other low-level pieces of information, it doesn't have the capacity to hold those disparate dots in its working memory at the same time.
And that's what's required for the critical connection to form.
The quiet is like a simultaneous viewing platform.
I like that.
When you're still and the mental field is quiet, the mind can hold multiple, seemingly disparate pieces of information just lightly.
Allowing them to drift closer.
Yeah. Until the magnetic connection between them, the pattern, the gestalt, is just effortlessly recognized.
And the recognition happens because the necessary quiet provides the operational space for that synthesis to occur.
It's an act of passive assembly.
It is.
So clarity isn't about struggling harder to find the pattern. It's about providing a spacious, low-effort environment so the pattern can step forward and introduce itself.
Without having to fight through all the internal clamor.
That is a fundamentally different model of understanding.
It is.
So let's shift our analysis to what happens right after one of these breakthroughs, or maybe what our human tendency is.
The impulse.
The impulse. We need to explore this core dichotomy between noticing and fixing, that deep-seated, almost instantaneous jump from a pure observation to an immediate intervention.
It happens so fast. The moment of pure insight, I see the structure, I recognize this long-term pattern, it is almost instantly followed by this overwhelming internal command.
Do something.
I must utilize this knowledge to improve or change something immediately. And this impulse, which is, it's so strongly socialized, it's tied to performance expectations.
It corrupts the purity of the insight itself.
It really does.
We're just wired for action, aren't we?
Huh.
Evolutionarily, noticing a problem means taking a corrective step. We see a hole, we want to patch it. We see a misalignment, we want to correct it.
Right.
So what does sustained, pure noticing even look like when it's completely absent that expectation of having to respond or act on it?
Pure noticing is sustained attention without obligation.
I like that. Attention without obligation.
It's allowing the information, the complexity, the structure, the pattern to just exist inside your awareness field as a reality.
So you're observing the system's behavior and leaving it psychologically untouched.
Exactly. The attention is fixed purely on the nature of what you're seeing, the mechanism of the pattern, not on the next step that you could take to utilize that observation.
And this is where recognizing patterns becomes transformative in a purely contextual way. When your focus shifts from fixing the individual symptoms, the urgent little holes that pop up,
To observing the systemic pattern that keeps creating them.
a completely different quality of understanding emerges.
A quality that is contextual, not urgent. Think about it. If you only see a symptom, you feel the pressure to treat that symptom immediately.
Of course.
But if you see this systemic pattern that generates that same symptom over and over again, the urgency starts to recede.
Why?
Because you understand that fixing it immediately might not only be ineffective, a kind of perpetual motion machine of fixing,
But it might actually obscure the larger, more interesting and stable truth of how the system actually behaves.
right?
The recognition is that the system is currently behaving exactly as it's designed to behave. The pattern just reveals the design.
And the act of pure noticing in that context is the recognition of an inevitability, given the current parameters.
That kind of understanding, it doesn't necessarily scream for change.
No, it just establishes a more profound reality.
And this leads right to that core idea from the sources that clarity arrives quietly and crucially without demanding action.
There's a huge psychological relief in that state. It's significant.
The idea that understanding can just exist, purely as knowledge, as an illumination of a structure, without an obligation to translate it immediately into a solution or an improvement plan.
It's knowledge existing entirely in the declarative mode, not the imperative mode.
It's the difference between seeing a map of a country and feeling forced to immediately plan a journey to go fix the geography.
That's a great analogy.
You can just appreciate the elevation, the relationships between the cities, the historical flow of the rivers, purely for the beauty of the information without ever setting foot on the road.
And this kind of observational analysis shows us how often deeper understanding is actually blocked precisely by that internal pressure to perform.
The pressure to use the information immediately.
Yes. If the mind knows that the second clarity arrives, it has to instantly shift into strategy mode.
It puts the brakes on.
It creates a resistance, a cognitive speed bump that can actually prevent the insight from fully forming or settling in. The mind literally holds back the answer because it knows the answer means work.
Because strategy mode is inherently effortful. It's focused, it's goal-oriented.
And clarity, as we've established, is often effortless and decentralized.
So the demand for action introduces all that effort and turbulence right back into the system.
And it interrupts the quiet state that allowed the clarity to emerge in the first place.
It's a self-defeating feedback loop.
The mind needs to feel safe in its stillness. It needs to know that the insight isn't a starting gun for a new race.
It's just a moment of seeing clearly.
A moment of objective recognition. And when that obligation for immediate performance is suspended, the information is processed more purely, more comprehensively.
It stays in that receptive state for longer.
It does.
This really feels like we're thinking out loud here, just recognizing patterns, sitting with ideas as they unfold.
Which is that reflective state from our sources.
It is. So let's just sit with that final idea for a moment. Allowing ideas to unfold. What does that sustained, gentle attention actually look like when it's completely devoid of critical judgment or an endpoint?
To sit with an idea is to sustain your attention in a highly receptive, non-instrumental state.
Non-instrumental, meaning you're not trying to use it for anything.
Exactly. It's a gentle presence focused solely on the structural integrity of the idea itself. You're allowing it to move and breathe within your mind without the interference of critical analysis.
So you're not arguing with it?
No. You're not testing it for flaws. You're not planning the next iteration. You are simply observing its internal logic as if it were a physical object placed right in front of you.
It sounds like a process of just watching the confusion gently reorganize itself.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Because initial confusion is often just complexity that's been viewed too quickly or from too close up. So by sitting with it, the mind gets accustomed to the sheer volume and the complexity. And through that patient, non-judgmental exposure, the underlying pattern just reveals itself organically.
Without the application of force. The act of patient attention, it acts like a kind of gentle gravity on all the disparate parts of the idea.
And they start to attract each other.
Not through your force of will, but just through proximity and sustained calm. Where there was initially just this amorphous cloud of data points, an intelligible structure begins to crystallize.
Purely because attention has been held steady and non-critically over time.
The system organizes itself when it's not being manipulated.
And the key distinction here, which I think ties all of our sections together, is that this is not passive inattention. It's not zoning out.
Not at all.
This sustained attention, this quiet observation, is a sophisticated form of mental engagement.
It is. It's just one that prioritizes reception and spatial awareness over propulsion and immediate utility.
It is the deep dive into the information without the intent to surface with a trophy or a mandate.
It's appreciating the pure structural architecture of understanding itself, divorced entirely from the requirement of application.
I have to say, I feel a real sense of bright, spacious calm after this conversation.
Me too.
It's genuinely refreshing to dive into a topic and focus purely on the physics of perspective and the mechanisms of emergence without feeling that obligation to build some kind of strategic framework at the end.
Right.
And the most profound shifts in perspective, as we've explored, they so often result from subtraction.
Removing things, not adding them.
Right. Removing urgency, removing effort, removing obligation, not adding new strategies or more information.
And I think the value of this whole observation lies in recognizing that clarity is often an inherent quality of the situation. It's just waiting.
Waiting for the necessary conditions of light and distance to be met by the viewer.
It reminds us that we all possess this capacity for effortless understanding, provided we can just step away from the immediate demand for results.
And simply allow our cognitive systems to do their quiet, patient work. And so we'll leave you with this final open-ended thought, something to just sit with. If true clarity only requires quiet observation and distance, if the profound structure you need to see is already visible, but it's obscured only by your own proximity or your own velocity, what necessary distance might you still need to find today or tomorrow to allow that understanding to emerge fully?
The continuous process of observation is the ultimate landscape of knowledge, and we are simply the witnesses to its gradual, inevitable unfolding.